By the early 20th century, Spain was a nation in turmoil, not yet industrialized like its northern European neighbors, burdened by deep class divisions and scarred by the loss of its last major overseas colonies, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines in 1898. That defeat in the Spanish-American War had triggered what historians call the Generation of '98, an intellectual movement lamenting Spain's decline and debating how to modernize the country. Spain's economy was lopsided. Industrial areas like Catalonia and the Basque Country were prosperous and urban, while vast rural regions, especially in Andalusia and Extremadura, were dominated by latifundia, large estates, and grinding poverty among landless peasants. The political system, under the constitutional monarchy of Alfonso III, was riddled with corruption and electoral fraud through a practice called caciquismo, local political bosses controlling votes. The early 20th century saw growing unrest as various groups demanded radical change. Anarchists, especially strong in Catalonia and Andalusia, advocated the abolition of the state and capitalism, organizing through powerful trade unions like the CNT, Confederación Nacional del Trabajo. Socialists, PSOE and UGT, called for labor rights and gradual reform. Republicans sought to replace the monarchy with a democratic secular state. Separatists in Catalonia and the Basque Country pushed for regional autonomy or independence. Conservatives, including monarchists, the Catholic Church, and landowners, sought to preserve Spain's traditional hierarchies. Amid post-World War I instability, General Miguel Primo de Rivera staged a coup in 1923 with the king's blessing and established a military dictatorship. While he initially stabilized the country, his regime failed to solve Spain's structural economic and political problems. By 1930, mounting opposition forced him to resign, and the monarchy quickly lost legitimacy. In April 1931, municipal elections showed overwhelming support for Republican candidates. King Alfonso III fled, and the Second Republic was proclaimed. Its early years were marked by ambitious reforms. Land reform to redistribute estates to peasants. Secularization, including removing Catholic control over education. Women's suffrage granted in 1931. Autonomy statutes for Catalonia and the Basque Country. These measures pleased the left, but alarmed conservatives, landowners, and the church. Political polarization deepened, with strikes, riots, and counter-reactionary violence becoming common. The Republic's first phase, 1931 to 1933, was dominated by left-leaning coalitions, but conservative forces regained power in the 1933 elections, rolling back reforms and clashing with workers' movements. The left responded with mass protests and strikes, notably the Asturian miners' uprising in 1934, which was brutally suppressed by the army under General Francisco Franco. By 1936, tensions reached breaking point. The Popular Front, a left-wing coalition of Republicans, Socialists, and Communists, narrowly won the February 1936 elections. Right-wing groups including monarchists, fascist-inspired Falange, and conservative military officers began plotting a coup. On July 13, 1936, the assassination of right-wing politician José Calvo Sotelo by elements of the Assault Guard, a Republican police unit, became the trigger for action. 4 days later, on July 17, 18, military garrisons in Spanish Morocco rose in rebellion, marking the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War. The coup launched on July 17, 1936, began in the Spanish Protectorate of Morocco, where the colonial army, including the elite regulares, Moroccan troops, and the Spanish Foreign Legion, was staunchly loyal to right-wing military leadership. The following day, the rebellion spread to the Spanish mainland. However, the uprising was only partially successful. Instead of a swift seizure of power as its leaders had planned, the coup met strong resistance in many cities. The outcome in each region depended largely on the stance of local military commanders, the loyalty of police units, and the speed of mobilization by left-wing workers' organizations. Key outcomes of the first days. The rebels quickly took control of Navarre, Old Castile, Galicia, Seville, and much of western Andalusia, as well as parts of Aragon and Leon. The Republic retained Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, the Basque Country, most of eastern and southern Spain, and much of central Castile. Strategic cities like Seville became rebel strongholds due to decisive action by officers such as General Capo de Llano. Barcelona saw a fierce street battle in which workers' militias, aided by loyal assault guards, crushed the local coup attempt. The result was a geographic split that would define the war. Nationalists controlling much of the north and west, Republicans holding the main industrial and agricultural heartlands in the east and south. In Republican territory, the failure of the coup sparked a spontaneous armed uprising by workers' groups, anarchists, socialists, and communists. Factories and farms were seized, churches were burned, and local committees took control in many areas. This created a revolutionary atmosphere, especially in Catalonia and Aragon, where anarchist collectives managed agriculture and industry under the CNT-FAI's leadership. While this energized the left, it also caused disorder and weakened central authority, making it harder for the Republican government to coordinate the war effort. In nationalist areas, the military imposed martial law, repressing opposition with severe brutality. Mass executions, particularly in rebel-held Andalusia and Navarre, were intended to terrorize potential resistance. One of the most infamous acts of early nationalist repression was the killing of Federico García Lorca, Spain's celebrated poet and playwright, in Granada in August 1936. Lorca, a liberal and openly homosexual intellectual, was executed without trial, an act that shocked the world and became a symbol of the war's cultural tragedy. The war quickly drew attention from abroad. Many feared it was a prelude to a wider European conflict between fascism and democracy, or fascism and communism, depending on perspective. Nationalists began receiving military aid from Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany almost immediately, while the Soviet Union would later support the Republic. Western democracies like Britain and France adopted a non-intervention policy, which in practice favored the Nationalists because it deprived the Republic of open arms purchases while allowing fascist aid to flow unchecked. Seville and the south, General Capo de Llano's seizure of Seville gave the rebels a key foothold in southern Spain and control of an important industrial city. From here, Nationalists could link their forces in Morocco with the mainland. The Nationalist march on Madrid. After securing Seville, the Nationalists under General Francisco Franco began moving north toward Madrid. This required crossing Republican-held territory and controlling crucial transport routes. In Toledo, a garrison of Nationalist forces, led by Colonel José Moscardó, held out for over 2 months inside the Alcázar fortress against Republican forces. The siege became a powerful propaganda symbol for the Nationalists when Franco's forces relieved it in late September. The initial coup was led by a group of senior generals, including Emilio Mola, José Sanjurjo, and Francisco Franco. However, Sanjurjo, the intended leader, died in a plane crash on July 20, 1936. Mola coordinated operations from the north. Franco, after airlifted from Morocco to mainland Spain with the help of German transport planes, Operation Magic Fire, quickly distinguished himself. By September 1936, the rebel leadership united under Franco, who was appointed Generalissimo Commander-in-Chief and head of the new nationalist government. His rise was aided by his reputation for discipline, his Moroccan campaign experience, and his political maneuvering. By October 1936, nationalist forces approached the outskirts of Madrid. The Republican government fled to Valencia, leaving the defense of the capital to militias and loyalist troops. The battle for Madrid, which would become one of the most famous sieges of the war, was about to begin. The Spanish Civil War was never a purely internal Spanish affair. From the very start, it became a proxy conflict for the great ideological struggles of the 1930s: fascism versus democracy, communism versus capitalism, revolution versus reaction. While the Spanish people bore the brunt of the fighting, the war drew in thousands of foreign fighters, vast quantities of weapons, and the direct intervention of foreign governments. Adolf Hitler saw Spain as an opportunity to support a potential fascist ally, test Germany's modern military technology, gain access to Spanish mineral resources. Within days of the uprising, Hitler approved Operation Magic Fire, an airlift that transported Franco's Army of Africa, the most battle-hardened nationalist troops, from Morocco to mainland Spain using the German Luftwaffe's Ju-52 transport planes, the first large-scale military airlift in history. Germany also sent the Condor Legion, a unit of Luftwaffe pilots and ground troops who would gain infamy for the bombing of Guernica in 1937. Modern tanks, artillery and military advisors, intelligence and communication equipment. Benito Mussolini went even further than Hitler in terms of troop commitment. Italy sent 70,000 plus ground troops, the Corpo Truppe Volontari, aircraft, artillery and tanks, naval support in the Mediterranean. Mussolini's goals were to expand fascist influence, check French power, and create a bloc of friendly authoritarian regimes in southern Europe. Under the dictatorship of Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, Portugal provided logistical aid, allowed nationalists to use its territory for movement of troops, and sent volunteer fighters known as the Viriatos. Joseph Stalin's USSR became the Republic's main state supporter, though aid was delayed until late 1936. The Soviets sent tanks, notably the T-26, planes, Polikarpov fighters and artillery, military advisors, political commissars to ensure communist influence in Republican ranks. Payment for this aid came at a high cost. Much of Spain's gold reserves, the Moscow gold, was shipped to the USSR. Stalin's motives were partly ideological, opposing fascism, but also pragmatic. He hoped to strengthen Soviet influence over the European left while avoiding direct war with Hitler. The Republic also inspired an unprecedented wave of foreign volunteerism. Organized by the Communist International, Comintern, the international brigades brought around 35,000 volunteers from more than 50 countries. The Abraham Lincoln Battalion from the United States, the British Battalion from the UK, the Thälmann Battalion from Germany, volunteers from France, Canada, Ireland, Poland and elsewhere. These were idealists, workers, intellectuals, and veterans of earlier struggles who saw Spain as the front line in the global fight against fascism. Figures like the British writer George Orwell and the American novelist Ernest Hemingway participated in or reported on the war, shaping its image in popular memory. Despite sympathies among their populations, the governments of Britain and France feared that aiding the Republic might provoke a general European war or drive moderate Spaniards into the arms of communism. In August 1936, they spearheaded the Non-Intervention Agreement, joined by 27 countries, including Germany, Italy, and the USSR. In theory, this agreement prohibited sending military aid to either side. In practice, Germany and Italy ignored it completely, supplying Franco openly. The USSR circumvented it with covert shipments. Britain and France enforced it strictly against the Republic, crippling its ability to buy weapons. This uneven application meant the Republic fought at a constant disadvantage in arms supply. The Spanish Civil War was one of the first major conflicts where modern propaganda played a central role. Both sides produced films, posters, and radio broadcasts to rally support at home and abroad. The Republic emphasized the defense of democracy and resistance to fascism, appealing to international solidarity. The Nationalists portrayed themselves as defenders of Christian civilization against godless communism and anarchy. Religious rhetoric was especially powerful. The Catholic Church hierarchy in Spain, with the Vatican's tacit approval, openly backed the Nationalists, framing the war as a crusade. The Spanish Civil War allowed foreign powers to experiment with military tactics that would later be used in WW2s. Aerial bombing of civilian targets, e.g. Guernica by the Condor Legion. Close air support for advancing troops, mechanized infantry, and coordinated tank aircraft assaults. For Hitler and Mussolini, Spain was not only a strategic win, but also a rehearsal for global conflict. By the end of 1936, the war had clearly become more than a domestic rebellion. It was now a continental struggle with modern warfare, foreign troops, and global ideological stakes. The Spanish Civil War's shadow has stretched far beyond its official end in April 1939. It shaped Spain's 20th century trajectory, became a touchstone for global political struggles, and left an enduring mark on literature, art, and historical memory. Franco ruled Spain as a military dictator for 36 years, presiding over a one-party state dominated by the Falange and closely aligned with the Catholic Church. His regime combined political repression, strict censorship, secret police surveillance, mass imprisonment, and executions of political opponents; centralization, suppression of regional autonomy in Catalonia and the Basque Country; social conservatism, promotion of traditional gender roles, censorship of art and literature, and heavy church influence in education. Economically, Spain was isolated in the 1940s due to its fascist associations, leading to shortages and poverty. Only in the late 1950s did gradual modernization and limited economic liberalization begin, leading to the so-called Spanish miracle of the 1960s. Franco designated Prince Juan Carlos as his successor, ensuring the monarchy's restoration under his chosen conditions. Franco died in November 1975. Contrary to fears of renewed conflict, Spain underwent a peaceful transition to democracy, La Transición, 1978. Constitution established a parliamentary monarchy, restored regional autonomy, and guaranteed civil rights. Political parties were legalized, including the Communist Party. Amnesty laws shielded most Franco-era crimes from prosecution, a compromise intended to maintain stability, but one that still sparks debate. For decades after Franco's death, Spain avoided openly confronting the crimes and divisions of the civil war and dictatorship. This pact of forgetting, Pacto del Olvido, was an informal agreement among political elites to focus on building democracy rather than revisiting old wounds. However, since the 2000s, there has been renewed interest in confronting the past. Historical Memory Law, 2007, condemned Franco's regime, provided for the removal of fascist symbols, and supported exhumations of mass graves. Valley of the Fallen, Franco's monumental burial site, has been at the center of controversy. His remains were removed in 2019. This reopening of the past has reignited debates over whether reconciliation or accountability should be the priority. The Spanish Civil War left a profound artistic and intellectual legacy, inspiring works across media. Literature, Homage to Catalonia, 1938 by George Orwell, a first-hand account of his experiences fighting for the POUM militia. For Whom the Bell Tolls, 1940 by Ernest Hemingway, a novel about an American dynamiter in the Republican guerrillas. Countless memoirs, poems, and plays from exiled Spaniards. Art, Pablo Picasso's Guernica, a towering anti-war masterpiece that became a universal symbol of civilian suffering. Photography by Robert Capa and Gerda Taro, defining images of modern warfare. Film Land and Freedom, 1995, Dirán Ken Loach, and The Devil's Backbone, 2001, Dirán Guillermo del Toro, explore personal and political narratives set during or shaped by the war. The War Was a Warning of the Coming World War II, demonstrated the effectiveness and horror of aerial bombardment on civilians, showed how modern propaganda could mobilize global opinion, highlighted the unwillingness of democracies to confront fascism early, a lesson Britain and France would pay for in 1939. For the international left, the war was both a moment of solidarity via the international brigades and a bitter lesson in the dangers of internal ideological divisions. For the right, it was celebrated as a victory of traditional order over radicalism. In modern Spain, the civil war remains a sensitive topic. Public opinion is divided. Some see Franco's victory as the salvation of Spain from communist chaos. Others view it as the destruction of democracy and a brutal betrayal of the nation's future. Efforts to recover the bodies of the war dead from mass graves continue, as do political debates over education, memorialization, and historical responsibility. The Spanish Civil War was not merely a domestic struggle, it was a microcosm of the ideological battle lines of the 20th century. It was fought in villages and cities, in the skies above and in the hearts of millions, drawing in the hopes and fears of people from across the world. Its legacy of courage, betrayal, idealism, and atrocity still resonates today, not only in Spain, but wherever the questions of democracy, authoritarianism, and human dignity are contested.